Croissant. This is James, aka JP Harker, coming to you with another video, and this is Red Storm. Chapter 1. Battle Marks. The needle hurt. It always did, but Callian did not acknowledge the pain. She sat still on the stool, back straight and face set, as Hewin inked the fresh lines above her eye. Though she already wore waves and spirals across her arms, neck and torso, this would be the first time she was blessed by battle marks on her face, and she focused on her dragonfire as the needle pricked her flesh. The familiar warm ball of light glowed in her abdomen, pulsing softly with every exhalation. For well over a decade now, that gentle light had been the very center of Callian's world, the calm amidst the storm. Callian kept her mind on the light, ignoring the needle's jabbing sting, with the steady steam of sweat running from her brow. A strand of flame-red hair had fallen across her eye, and she fought back a wince as Hewin brushed it behind her ear. To him she was sure that the gesture meant nothing, a simple favour to assist her of the gathering while he finished inking her marks. To Callian, the touch was unwelcome and uncomfortable, and she reminded herself that Hewin was just a brother trying to be helpful. She wished he would finish the work and be done with this. If nothing else, the heat was growing worse by the heartbeat, and she had matters to settle before she could go indoors. They were performing the ritual outside the city, on a patch of thin grass a little south of Kandarium. She was facing away from it, but Callian knew well the great stone walls that surrounded Elazar's capital, which she and her comrades had conquered only a handful of days before. Callian's new marks were in recognition of her deeds that day, when she'd been the first warrior of the Kaldon to scale those stony ramparts. It had been a hard fight, though not the worst of Callian's life, and the end result had been good for all concerned. Elazar had saved his people honourably, and the Caledon had earned the right to send half their warriors home. And the sooner Lucan puts that plan into action, the better. We do not belong here. Callian found herself thinking on Elazar. Long before he became king of Ushir, Elazar, son of Darizar, had been the proud fox, the only Ashiran in the world to be a brother of the Gathering. She'd never liked him much, this strange foreigner with his arrogant air and endless chatter, but looking back, she suspected she'd been a little harsh with him. She'd mocked and belittled him after minimal provocation, and he'd shown himself to be worthy of the honour that Lucan had given him back home, and the honour his people had given him here. For all his tiresome prattle, Elazar was a decent man, and would probably make a good king. Already many of his people had named him Elazar the Peacemaker. Had Callian's father been there with them, he would have told her to go to Elazar and apologise for all the times she'd looked down on him. But Kirin was half a world away, and Callian wasn't going to go grovelling on her own initiative. In any case, Elazar didn't really need her apology. For a few snide comments here and there, his pride could withstand most things. Her eyes flicked up to look at Hewin as he worked. None of the Darinii here had much skill with the needle, and Callian thought how odd it was that she didn't care that Hewin was a Gorvik. Not so long ago, the notion of letting her flesh be marked by someone from another tribe would have horrified her, Gatherim or no. But now, especially out here, the distinction didn't seem to matter as it once had. Rhianwen's great alliance became more real with each passing day. Callian resisted the urge to sigh. Though she'd met the wildcat briefly after the nightmare of Second Mantwin, she'd fought in the Legion against the savage Sarii, but she had not truly known her. Yet it was thanks to Rhianwen that all this was possible. In some ways, it was also thanks to her that Callian had become Gatherim. Women had entered the warrior elite before, but Rhianwen's elevation to their ranks had been a fateful event, coming as it did at the very birth of the Caledon. The naming of Fearless Wildcat had brought female Gatherim to the very front line of the tribe's thoughts, banishing the notion that it was somehow an oddity. Callian's mouth twitched. And now look at us. All the Gatherim in Oshir had done the dragon god proud in the battle, but Red Storm had been first over the wall, and Prowling Lioness had taken the city's surrender. Between us, Merian and I left little glory for the menfolk. It was hard to keep still while Hewin went about his work, but Callian had spent many years suppressing the urge to shift and fidget. She brought her mind back to the gentle glow behind her navel, and kept her body patiently motionless, even if she could do nothing to stop the sweat. It was unusual for Mavonak's rites to be performed in sunlight, but the Gatherim had decided that it didn't really matter out here. They were in the land of Oshir, and the god looking down on them now was Rihu, not Belanos, and there was no fear of godly rivalries casting misfortune on them. After what felt like an age, the Gorvik stepped back from her, and smiled as he admired his handiwork. All is done. Taran and the dragon will see you clearer than ever, Red Storm. Callian gave him a small nod, trying to show appreciation without encouraging further interaction. Hewin was a fine enough warrior, but, like most men middle-age, he could be irritatingly talkative. She stood up and rose briefly onto her toes, feeling the muscles in her legs stretch after so long sitting down. She'd need to loosen up her joints before going about her next business. Already the skin around her left eye had the burning tingle that always came with new battle marks, but Callian didn't let it bother her. She said a silent prayer to Mavonak, thanking him for his guidance and assuring him that she would do all she could to be worthy of his marks. At some point today she would have to find a clear pool, or borrow a looking glass, and see the new marks with her own eyes, though she was confident that Hewin would have done a good job. She'd seen his work on Merian's skin, and he was clearly the best inker the Gorvikai had. She nodded to him again. The Gorvik was around Callian's own height, but while she was built all of lean muscle, Hewin was heavy-set and slowly running to fat. He was still strong, of course. The man was Gatherim after all. But age had done more than grey his hair, and a definite paunch now rolled over his belt. He returned the nod, and looked like he might be about to say something, so Callian spoke before any chatter could start. There is no greater honour than the dragon's sight, and you honour me with your skill today, brother. He smiled, and Callian made a point of meeting his eyes. She'd never much liked doing that, but it was expected, especially among the warrior elite, and Hewin deserves her courtesy. Sister, you are most welcome. Again Callian spoke before he could go on. I have duties now, excuse me. Hewin blinked, but answered quickly. Of course. The dragon guide you, Red Storm. She bowed her head. And you, Bolrora. With that she turned and started off east, following the line of the wall. Ahead of her was the beginning of the Greenlands, where the great desert gave way to Ashir's fertile pastures, and she could already see the little group of people waiting for her. She'd wanted her new marks to be made before this started, but the process had been Gatherim business, and it would not have been right for the rest of them to see it. But what comes now is Gatherim business too, of a sort. She felt anger mixed with anxiety threaten to well up in her chest, and she fought it down with practiced ease. The gentle light of dragonfire warmed her from the inside, and focused her mind ready for the task to come. Callian strode across the scrubby grass, with her eyes fixed straight ahead, and told herself to trust in her abilities. You can do this without causing real harm, remember that. It would ruin many a good mood tonight if she killed this fool by accident. It is Section 1 of Chapter 1, Red Storm, Book 5 of the Caledon Saga, Part 1. This has been James, aka JP Harker. Well vowed.